We're out here in the garden today. We just received 4 inches of snow. It is not time to plant anything yet, but it is the perfect time to come out and assess what we have to work with for the next gardening season. It's, December 28th?
27th.
27th?
Uh-huh.
Okay, 2021. Just unfreeze the gate there. I always begin my garden planning by assessing the growing space that I have to work with. This is a really important step for when you're going to be ordering seeds for your garden. You want to make sure you know how much space you have, because you might think you have more or less than you actually do. And if you're money conscious, wanting to make sure that you invest your money in the right places, in the right amount of seeds and the right amount of garden inputs like soil and wood chips, then you need to know how much space you have and kind of the space that you're working with.
And why do we need to know how many seeds to buy? Because it's time to buy seeds.
Oh yes, it's time to buy seeds. Some people that I follow on the Facebooks and stuff have already ordered their garden seeds for 2022. They placed their orders in October. And so I'm feeling a little behind, even though normally I do order my seeds in January. With everything that's happened in the past couple years, you want to get those seeds as soon as possible. And it's just smart anyway to be prepared, because you never know what kind of shipping delays or anything is going to happen. So this last year, I worked with about half of this garden. I set this up 2 years ago and actually grew in it last year. We have several rows in place, and they're all no dig or minimal dig, regeneratively set up rows. The idea is that you don't till the soil and you set up the rows so that year after year you're just building on top of it, and the soil underneath is becoming healthier and healthier. And over time you have to put in less and less inputs, such as compost and wood chips and all that good stuff. I don't use fertilizer or sprays or anything like that. Right now I have a couple rows set up with a winter garden, and it's kind of hidden under the snow right now. I don't know what's still alive, but I did plant kale, carrots, and spinach back in September. So that's underneath these hoops. So I have baby kale growing underneath this section. There is a couple layers of fabric under here, just like a white, not a landscaping fabric, but a insect barrier fabric. It's not very insulated or anything, and it's real lightweight. That's under here. And I haven't checked on it in a while, so let's see if anything's growing. Oh yeah, we got some baby stuff under there. This was just an experiment to see how long into the winter things would stay alive without any type of greenhouse or heating system or anything. The rest of the kale, carrots, and spinach are underneath this section. That'll all come out in the spring, and so I'll plan as though there's nothing in those rows. I don't know if you can see it on camera, but each one of these mounds is a row, and I think I have around 12 or 15 rows. I'm not sure. That's why we're out here assessing the situation. These 2 rows have garlic planted in them that'll be ready to harvest in July. I'll have to account for that in my garden planning. In between each row is a pathway that gives me enough space to get in there and work. This section is really wide. This is like the main pathway. It's as wide as the gate at the top there. The idea is for it to at least be wide enough for a wheelbarrow to go down, and then I can just take a bucket and transfer, or a shovel, and transfer stuff onto the rows like compost. All around the garden we have just basic T-posts and welded wire fencing, and it goes from that corner to up near the turkeys, and then up to the gate. I think it's roughly 60 by 40, just for reference. There's 14 rows. They're 25 feet long by about 2.5 feet wide. And then I started this experiment down here with 4 rows to grow potatoes in. They're built a little bit differently because potatoes require such a deep growing space, and they do need to be dug up and tilled and stuff for the method that I'm using. And those are about 25 by 4.
And it's freezing, so we're going to continue this conversation inside.
Yay!
It's pretty cold out there, huh?
It's really cold. So after assessing the growing space, just doing a general assessment, then later on I'll go through and take specific measurements of each row and each pathway and get exact calculations for how much square footage I have of growing space and of pathway space. The measurements will come in handy, for a lot of things.
What is your method for calculating the square footage?
I go out there with a tape measure, and ideally I would have one of those long measuring tapes just with the scale of my garden, the one that you go like this with, I rope someone into helping me measure it, and I measure each individual bed. I measure the actual flat growing area. I have raised rows that don't have edges on them, and so there is a bit of space that's slanted that I'm not going to be planting seeds into. So I measure the actual flat growing space of each row, draw it out on graph paper or just regular paper, and then write down the measurements next to each bed, because even though I tried to standardize the size of the beds, inevitably each row is going to be slightly different because I didn't use like stakes and strings and levels and different things. I used my tools as I was going to be the measurement. So each bed is a broad forks width, just for ease of working the soil. I'll be making another video about how I go more in depth on calculating the square footage, and I'll probably have like illustrations and show you actually how I draw it out, and we'll go out there with a measuring tape and be like, yep, about that size. And it'll be fun this year too because the rows are curved a little bit. So that will add an interesting dynamic to the math of it.
How many rows did you use in 2021?
9 rows.
And so how many do you have now?
17 rows. Plus, I'm gonna probably be using a second garden that's at a location about 5 minutes away. So I'll have to do the same kind of assessment and recalculate the square footage because I added several rows in over there too. This last year I had a job over the course of the spring and summer, and next year I'm not planning to have a job and I'm gonna focus on the farm. I was able to do a lot with limited time last year, and so I'm really excited for this next year, expanding the garden space and investing way more time into it. I think I'll get a much bigger yield and just be able to grow a lot more, do a lot more that I've been wanting to do. So when assessing my growing space and deciding how much space I'm actually going to use next year, I not only look at how much food I want to grow, but I also have to take into consideration how much time I'm going to have to be able to invest in the garden and manage it properly. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot more time than you think if you really want each individual plant to thrive and if you want to catch problems before they get out of hand, pest problems or disease. What I like to do is make sure I am going to have enough time to visit each individual plant at least a couple times a week. It's how you're going to learn the most and get the most out of your garden, because you're catching problems before they start. You're able to go around and visit each plant, prune where needed, weed, stake things up, harvest at the right times, and also take notes for next year.
How many years have you been growing a garden?
2022 will be my 8th official year gardening. Before that, I would plant a couple carrots and sugar snap peas in a spare corner of our suburban yard.
For people who might be starting their first garden this year, what we have would probably be too big for them unless they're the type of person who can just go ahead and do that. When you're learning this type of gardening, there is so much to learn that you just have to be ready to devote a lot of time to it.
Yeah, a lot of time, and there's so much thought that goes into each step of the process. The principles are really simple. They're really simple and they're scalable. You can do what I'm doing on a much smaller scale to start. This video is going to be the first in a long series of documenting each step of my gardening process, and I'm excited to show it to you.